Well, hello everybody and welcome to the very first video of Barbecue with Chris. I decided to start this channel just to show how everybody can make great barbecue at home with just a few simple ingredients, a few inexpensive smokers or grills or what have you, and basically create something that you would get restaurant quality but in your home that you can serve for family, friends, events, etc. So today, for our first video, we're going to be doing a 6.95 bone-in pork shoulder roast, or Boston butt, whatever you prefer to call it. I'm going to get this out of the packaging and we'll get started. Now that we've got our pork butt out of the packaging, we'll take a quick moment to inspect it. This will be your fat cap. This will be where your bone comes in, and this is what they jokingly call the money muscle. This is what you serve in your competitions and things like that. You want to keep in mind where all these things are, because when you go to pull the pork, which is what I'm doing today, is a pulled pork, not a sliced pork or anything like that. The money muscle will give you the absolute best. That's what I always say for myself. You know, you put in the hard work doing the cooking, you deserve the best. So we're going to start off by seasoning this up. Now I'm using a mixture of salt, pepper, and garlic. It is basically a half and half mixture of coarse black pepper and coarse kosher salt, and then whatever that measurement is. So if I do half a cup of each one of those, then I will do a quarter cup of coarse granulated garlic, and just shake it up, put it in a shaker, and that's going to be the very first thing. This is not going to have anything to do as far as your rub or coating or anything like that. This is just the seasoning, and you can go kind of heavy on it because this is a big cut of meat. It's going to be in there for a long time. Just make sure you get... I always start with the fat cap because on my cookers, the heat source is on the lower side, on the underneath the meat, and you want the fat to be an insulating layer. That's what you want to render down. Some people do fat up, some people do fat down, but in my experience, I put the fat towards wherever the heat's coming in. If the heat's coming in to the top and the side, you want the fat up. If it's coming up from the bottom, then you want it fat down. So I'll flip that over now that I got a decent coat on the bottom. And that's going to be our first step, and just pat it a little bit. Don't really rub it in or anything like that, because you want it to just adhere to the meat and not get any big pockets of salt or pepper, and that's not very good. Second step is going to be just get some plain old cheap yellow mustard. This isn't going to do anything for the flavor, but this will be an important step as far as putting on our rub in a minute. You just want a thin, light layer. What that's going to do is going to insulate the seasoning. The seasoning is going to be in contact with the meat, and to build your bark and your crust on the outside. That's all this is going to do. That way, your rub will actually adhere to the meat. It won't be prone to wash off whenever you spritz it or anything like that. Now today's rub that I'm using is the Weber Kansas City barbecue rub. I normally use Twisted Q's Applewood rub, but unfortunately I'm not able to find it right now at the moment, with it being kind of the off season of this time of year. Hopefully before too long some of the local stores will start carrying it again. So we've got that side slathered up with the yellow mustard. We're going to get this side slathered up. Make sure you get all your sides in a real light coat. You don't want any big clumps or cakes. You just want just enough to give it a slight yellow tint. That's going to be all that you need. Now we're going to go back on the other side here now that we've got it slathered up. And we're just going to give it a nice dose of the barbecue rub. You don't want to go super heavy on it. Basically, you just want to... Just like with the mustard, you just want this thing to change from one color to the other. You don't want any big thick patches or anything like that, because that's going to cause problems. It's going to cake up. It's going to be a harsh section. Of course, we're pulling this so it'll all mix together, but where this rub has a lot of sugar in it, what you'll end up with is some pockets that might have a lot more caramelization, or that sugar is going to burn as it sits on that smoker, depending on how long it's in and the temperature and everything. So we got that side rubbed up. We're going to go make sure you get those sides. It helps to do this method right there. Put your hand down the side. And I always do gloved hand and clean hand. That way you don't get any contamination. You're not having to wash your hands a bunch of times, and you're not getting a bunch of, you know, vinegars and salts and things all over your hands and everything. So now we've got that in place. Like I said, we're not going to rub this because, as you can see, the rub stays on quite well. So what I am going to do, though, and this is my final step before I take it out to the smoker, I like to take a little olive oil spray. And this is just something I come up with. I don't see a lot of people doing this, but, you know, whenever I spritz to keep this moist, every hour or so I'm going to spritz it with apple cider vinegar. And it's prone to washing off your rub. So what you want to do, give it just a nice little coat of that. And what that's going to do, it's going to act like a glue. It's going to, you know, the rub's adhered with the mustard, but that's going to pretty much glue it down, and it's going to already start that crust process while it's in the smoker. While it's in the smoker, that oil is going to start just working like butter in a pan. It's going to get that crust started forming a lot quicker, I've found. So now that we've got it all rubbed up, it's ready to go. I don't recommend resting it or letting it come up to room temperature. Pork can get you sick if you let it get too warm and too long. And it's actually more beneficial to put it on the smoker, is basically straight from the fridge to the rub to the smoker. That colder temperature, what that's going to do when it reacts with that smoke is going to help build a denser smoke and absorb more smoke. The cooler you can keep that and the longer you can keep it in the smoke, the more smoke flavor you're going to get with your barbecue. So I'll get this all cleaned up here. I'll head out to the smoker and we'll throw it on and we'll go from there. So we're out here at the smoker, and today I'm going to be using my newest smoker slash grill. It's going to be the Pit Boss 820D. I'm using B&B Championship Blend pellets. I believe it has pecan, cherry, and a bit of oak. It's a blend. These little pellets here, basically they feed through this hopper, and that's what maintains your temperature. It's got a temperature probe in there that runs back and forth and cycles the auger, and then that basically controls your fire. We're going to throw this on now. I'm starting it off on the actual smoke setting. Now we'll get into that in a minute because your temperatures vary. I normally smoke at 275, but with this particular grill, it's a little bit different. What you got to do is start it off on the smoke setting for a couple of hours, and that really helps build that smoke, and then you can take it up to your actual temperature that you plan on smoking at. It gives you a little bit better results, and with this particular type of grill or smoker, where it's a wood fire constantly, you're going to have to wrap once you get about 165, 170 degrees internal temperature, so you don't over smoke the meat, dry it out, etc. So we're going to do all that. I'm going to get this thrown on, and then we'll go from there. So on our pork butt, we've hit the 2-hour mark. I've been running it just strictly on the smoke setting here on the pellet smoker, just so I can get a lot of smoke flavor in there since it's a lower temperature. And what I've done here, I've taken the pan previously that we used to rub this pork butt up, and I've just left those seasonings and things in there. And what I've done is I've put about an inch or so of apple cider vinegar in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the pork butt out, I'm going to set it on this rack, and that'll elevate it off the cooking surface, and it'll also keep it moist while it's in the smoker. And now we're going to start concentrating on getting it up to temperature. I'm going to bump up the smoker after I get it back in, and I will show you that once I get all that accomplished. So now I've got the pork butt on the pan, and what I'm going to go do here is going to wrap So I've got our pork butt on the pan now, and the pan is in the smoker. As you can see, it's still trying to billow a little bit of smoke. What we're going to do is we're going to kick it up. I'm going to be smoking this pork butt on 275, but this smoker tends to run a bit hot, so what I'm going to do is take it just to 250, and then we'll see how it's doing. It's pretty warm outside. If it's colder temperatures, you need to amp it up a little bit more. As you can hear, that auger will start turning. You'll get more smoke. That temperature is going to start coming up. What I'm also going to do, just got me a spray bottle with half and half water and apple cider vinegar, and as you can see, it looks really good. The fat's not really started to render or anything like that yet, but the crust is starting to get just a tad bit dry. So we're just going to give it a little spritz, just enough to add a little moisture to the top of it there. And you can see that rub, it just kind of that rub will absorb a lot of that, and it'll start melting and breaking down and start making more of a coating and less of just a seasoning that's sitting on top. So we're going to close it up. We're not worried about internal temperature yet. You don't even want to bother putting a temperature probe in it until it's been on about 4 hours. Some people say that if you put a temperature probe in when it's still cold and when you first put it on, that you could possibly introduce bacteria into the meat. I don't know if that's true or not, but for safety's sake, I don't do it. Like I said, I know it's not going to be anywhere near the temperature that I'm shooting for, which is actually going to be 205 degrees. If you're just grilling something, 165 is considered done for pork or chicken or what have you. But on a pork butt, where we're doing it at a lower, slower temperature, we want to cook for longer, and we want to slowly render all that fat out of there. And the target temp will actually be 205. That will let you actually pull it apart. If you were doing sliced pork with a boneless pork butt, you could just do 165 or so, and then you can slice it right up. But that's not what we're doing today. We're going to pull it apart, and that 205 will really let the temperature slowly break down all the fat. So we're going to close it up, and every hour or so I'm going to come out here and check it, and I'm going to give it a little spritz and just make sure it's not drying out. But once that fat starts to break down, that's when we'll really see a lot. Now this meat, there's a misconception that the longer and more you smoke, the better it is, but actually once it gets to about 165, 175 degrees, that meat's not going to take any more extra smoke. It's just going to build up a harsh coating on the outside. Your bark's going to start to burn and all that. And it doesn't really give you a good flavor. It gives it a burnt and harsh taste, and we don't want that. And since this is completely wood-fired, I'm not, on the Acorn, for example, you could use charcoal and wood chunks, and once the wood chunks burn off, the charcoal is just giving you heat. But this is a complete wood fire, so what we're going to do is take it to about 170 degrees or so, 175. At that point, we know it's not going to get any more smoke, and we also have pushed past the stall where the fat starts breaking down. At that point, we're going to pull it off, and we're going to wrap it up in some foil so it'll preserve that bark and not get burnt. So we'll check back here when we get ready to put our temperature probe in, and we'll see where the temperature's sitting at, and I'll show you how to use the temperature probe and how going by temperature and not time is actually the best method when doing barbecue. Alright folks, so we've hit our 4-hour mark. We're going to open this up here and take a look at our pork butt. As I said before, I come out here every hour and spritz it with a little bit of apple cider vinegar. So as you can see there, looks really good, it's steaming really nice. What I'm going to want to do though, see it still is it's starting to dry up a little bit. Every hour it's going to dry up quite a bit. You need to stay on this for sure. We're going to spritz it with a little more apple cider vinegar, and you definitely want to do this up until the point that you wrap, just so it doesn't dry out. Now I've got it sitting on a water pan full of water and apple cider vinegar, but still that's only really going to help the bottom. The top is going to need to be spritzed occasionally just to keep it right. Now I mentioned before about temperature control, and I'm going to show you the device that I use. Now this here is the ThermoProbe, and it is a dual probe thermometer. So what you're going to have on this thermometer, you're going to have a meat probe, which will actually go in the meat itself and tell you the internal temperature of the meat. Now it's got a secondary probe on this as well, and this here is going to be your grate temperature. Now I kind of skipped a step earlier because normally I put my grate temperature in immediately, and what this grate temperature will do is when you apply this little clip to it, you can put it right on your cooking surface, and that'll tell you exactly what temperature you've got on your cooking grate. These little thermometers that are on your grills, I mean, they're pretty close, but for the most part, they're not extremely accurate. They can vary so much because it uses a bimetal spring. It expands and contracts, and you could just bump this or turn this or be cleaning and hit it, and you could actually, get it off by, 10, 20 degrees or more. The one on my Acorn grill is 25 degrees off of what this tells, but this digital thermometer will tell you exactly what temperature it is. Now since I'm using the Pit Boss, it has a little hole in the side here, which is perfect. You can take that clip off, slide it right through, make sure your wire is not touching the grate in any way, and then you're going to put your clip on just like this. And what that clip will do, you can hook it onto your grate there, and make sure you're close to where you're cooking at, because you want to get the reading right where your meat's going to be at, so you get an accurate reading. Because this can actually vary. Having a little trouble here. This can actually vary quite a bit. Sometimes 20 degrees from here to here to here, because your fire source is right here. This is where your stack is, the heat's escaping. So on some, the heat will be hotter here, and on some, it'll build up here on the other side. You know, it just really depends. So now I've got my meat probe. Now I mentioned before in the very beginning part of the video, you know, you have your money muscle, you have your bone, and your temperature probe will not be accurate. If it's touching a piece of bone, that bone will give you a false reading. So the main thing is you want to try to find the fattiest part of the pork butt, and I normally go in about right in this area here and push on through to where it's fairly well in there. So now that we've got that in place, we've spritzed it, and I think I'm going to add a little more spritz just because it's already kind of soaking that up. So we're going to hit it pretty liberal spray here just to make sure. This is a good time to check your water level in your pan. You never want your water level to completely dry up, because then it's going to start burning and it's going to give a terrible flavor to your barbecue. So always check your water levels. Make sure you've got, you know, at least a ½ inch or more of liquid in the bottom of your pan at all times. That's where it pays to buy the gallon jugs of the apple cider vinegar, or if you run out, just get you just regular water, just something to keep it moist. So we're going to close this up. Now I'm going to show you this ThermoPro. So here's my ThermoPro dual unit. You can pick these up on eBay. I think I got mine for like 32 bucks or 34 bucks, something like that. And I highly recommend. I had a single probe ThermoPro before this one, and I accidentally left it in the rain and it got messed up. But this is a dual probe, so you can monitor both temperatures. So you're going to turn it on, okay, and immediately you see 95 degrees and 129 degrees. Now it'll take a moment for those probes to heat up and calibrate. I already shot to 149 and 133 degrees. So it's going to flash back and forth between your grate temperature and your actual meat temperature. Now the great thing about this particular model is, you know, like I said, they have one that's a single probe that you just put in and you just come out and check it. But this one has a remote feature. So you turn this remote on and it'll take a second to calibrate and catch up. But I believe it's up to 200 or 300 feet. So I can take this if I'm doing an all-night smoke, or if I'm going to be, you know, doing something around the house or whatever, and can't sit and watch this thing constantly. I can take this little unit with me there, and what it'll do is give me a reading as soon as it calibrates, of course. Let me hit this. You can sync it up here. Let's sync up. It's going to flash there for us. And you can take this with you in the house or whatever, and you always can look right at it and have the temperature. Another cool feature is you can set the barbecue minimum high and low temperature. There we go, it's synced up. And it'll tell you barbecue is in probe 2 and the food probe is in probe 1. So you can know that's the temperature we're at right now. 129 degrees inside of the pork butt. 224 degrees is what we're reading at the grate temperature. And you'll notice, like I said earlier, I was setting it at 250 degrees. Well, my digital readout on my grill is showing me that I've got 295 degrees, but this is telling me another story. The digital readouts on these grills and your little analog thermometers can be incorrect, but this digital one, as long as you test it, and the way I test a new one that I get, I'll take it and put it in boiling water, and as long as it reads the correct temperature of that boiling water, I know that it's extremely accurate. So anyway, but you can set a minimum and maximum barbecue temperature and grill temperature. So let's say you're doing an all-night smoke, something like a brisket or something that's going to take a long time, and you want to have it ready for tomorrow morning for lunch. What you'll do is you'll set that barbecue minimum maximum and that grill minimum maximum. So if something happens during the night, let's say your barbecue grill runs out of fuel, or the fire snuffs out, or loses power, or something happens, that'll go off and tell you that that temperature is dipping below the one that you have set. and let you know that there's a problem. And also there's a maximum. So if you set that maximum, and let's say there's a big gust of wind and your barbecue temperature, the temperature inside your smoker or grill goes way up, and you need to come out and close some vents off, or you need to make some adjustments, that'll go off and say, hey, there's a problem with your grill, it's too hot. And also with your meat temperature, it'll let you know, and you can program in what temperature you want to be done at. So you can set different stages. So let's say you were going to go to sleep and you wanted to wrap it. You can leave it going and set it at 175 where we're going to wrap today. And it'll go off and say, hey, you need to wake up and wrap. And then you can bump it up to where it's done. And you can keep it there by the bed. You can do what I do. I just sleep on the couch and watch some TV and snooze. And then I wake up every couple hours and just check my little remote here and don't have to go outside in the cold or in the rain. And it can do its thing and let you know if anything happens. So we're going to keep on going right along. Like I said, we're 124 degrees. We're running 249 at the grate. I might bump her up. I'm going to bump it up to 300 degrees because I really want to stay more 275. I would prefer it be 275 to 300 versus lower than that, because that just adds more time. It's not really going to affect the cook so much other than just take more and more time. So we'll leave that where it is, and I'll get back to you guys when we're ready to wrap it. Alright folks, so we've hit our first target temperature of 175 degrees. You see the pork butt is looking really good. It's got a nice coat of bark on it. Really don't want that much more on it. It's still a little dry. I've been spritzing it every hour. So I'm going to give it another really good spritz. And I might add a little bit more. But what I'm going to do now is I've got some insulated barbecue gloves for high temperature. I've got a couple of layers of foil sitting here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it off of this, pull the probe out of it first so I can work with it. I'm going to remove it from the smoker. Because right now we don't want it to get any more smoke. It's already on the outside of the what they call the stall. So I'm going to put it on this full, pull her up, wrap it really good, really tight. Let's seal all those juices in. Like I said, we don't want it to get any darker. We don't want it to get any more crunchy. We want it to have a nice bark on it, but at the same token, we don't want it to get burnt or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our probe here just slightly. We're going to get rid of our pan with our juice in it. We no longer need it. Actually, I think I'm just going to go ahead and leave it because it's still generating a lot of heat and there's still a lot of liquid. So I'm going to take the pork butt and I'm just going to set it on top of this rack. That'll actually help dissipate a little bit of heat. Sometimes I'll remove it, sometimes I'll leave it in. We got so much liquid and stuff in there, I'm going to go ahead and leave it in there. It won't hurt anything. If anything, it'll just help regulate temperature. So, now's the point. Let's see. We've still got, I've bumped it up to about 300 degrees. And so it's been holding about 275 or so, right in that range. So now with it full up, we're going to leave it in the smoker and we're going to take it to 205. 205 is going to be our done point. So I'm going to constantly be coming out and checking the temperature and making sure that it's all right. And once we get to 205, we're going to pull it off and then we're going to let it rest for at least an hour. So that way, when you pull it, if you pull it and don't let it rest, it will immediately dry out. So we're going to wait till we get to 205, our target temperature, and then we'll go from there. So my temperature alarm just informed me that I have hit the internal temperature of 205. That means the pork butt is done. We're ready to pull it off. So I'm going to put on my insulated grill gloves to prevent getting burnt. Remove my temperature probe. Pull off the pork butt and I'm going to place it in a pan. And I'm going to start the shutdown sequence on the pit balls. My next maneuver will be take it inside. I'm going to let it rest for 1 hour. So that way all those juices and all that fat and all that flavor will redistribute into the pork butt. If you were to pull the bone out and pull it up, it would immediately dry out because all that moisture is just going to evacuate the meat. So what we want to do is just let it rest for a little bit. let it cool down a little bit, let it stop cooking, and then we're going to go from there. So here we are. The pork butt has been smoking since 8:30 this morning. We smoked it for a couple of hours. We ramped up the temperature. We let it get to 175. We fold it. Then we'll let it get to 205, which is done temperature, and then we'll let it rest for 1 hour. So here it is in the full, and now we're going to take it out of the full, and we're going to pull it, and we're going to show you what you will get when it's all said and done. Now look at that. The bark has been preserved. You have the bone and everything in it. Now, the true test to see if it's done. Look at that. The bone pulls right out, clean as a whistle. The meat falls right off of it. That right there is your natural temperature probe. Shows you it's done. We'll set that aside. And then just look, it shreds apart. So easy. You can just take these gloves and just shred this pork butt. You can grab a huge chunk and just give it a little tiny squeeze and a tiny pull, and it just falls apart. Now, like I said earlier, you have the money muscle, this line right here. Take that right there. And if you're the guy that smoked this, you're the guy that spent all those hours out there on the pit, what you want to do is take that right there, and that's for you. And look at that. Look at that smoke ring. Look how deep the smoke penetrated into the meat. Let's get another shot of that. See how deep the smoke goes? So that right there is a perfect example of a smoked pulled pork butt. And it just falls apart. Makes great barbecue sandwiches, barbecue pizza, tacos, anything you can imagine. Just pull it up. You're going to get still some fat, like this right here. Pull all the meat off of that, because that fat right there is not very edible. And just set it aside. But look, it just shreds apart. Super easy. The smell's just wafting up. Right there. That's a little bit of fat left over that didn't render. Set it aside. You don't want that. And just shreds apart. It's perfect for sandwiches, tacos, nachos, pizza, anything you can imagine you can do with barbecue pork. Quesadillas. That right there is absolutely perfect. Just a slight squeeze and a slight tear. Falls right apart. That right there, it's absolute pork perfection.